So thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us tonight. We're really excited to go over some great information. I'm joined by Dr. Coyne, who's our program director. So thank you, special thank you to Dr. Coyne for joining us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and get started here, and I'll walk you through the agenda for this evening's presentation. So Dr. Coyne will take over in just a moment and introduce himself. We're going to walk through the Masonomics tradition, the value of economics. We're going to take a really good look at the course curriculum and the curriculum details. We'll walk you through some information about our faculty members and exciting projects that are going on there. We're going to talk through what the online classroom looks like, how to be successful when you're pursuing a degree online. And then we're going to wrap up by walking you through the admissions requirements, tips and tricks there, and we'll give you some contact information for how to get in touch with us for additional support. And we have a really nice time slot at the end for lots of Q&As. So please ask us whatever questions that you have. Take advantage of the both of us here tonight so we can help answer any questions as you're making the decisions here. Perfect. And then as we get going here, just so everyone knows how to participate, you can use the chat features like some of you have already started to use to send your questions at the end there. And you can also update who you send your messages to by hitting the little drop down next to, and you can send it directly to us or the whole audience, whichever you prefer. You can also raise your hand and we will be able to take you off mute. If you prefer to ask a question live, we can do that for you as well. And then the last feature is that Q&A button at the bottom or the sidebar of the Zoom panel there where you can ask a question there too. So whatever you prefer for your questions, please feel free to send them our way. And then I am going to pass it over to Dr. Coyne. If you want to take it from here.
All right. Thank you so much, Mackenzie. And let me second in welcoming all of you this evening. And thank you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. I know you all have obligations, professional, personal, and otherwise. So I do appreciate you both showing an interest in our program, but also taking the time to spend a little bit of time with us discussing it. And just to introduce myself, I'm a professor of economics. So I'm a member of the Department of Economics. I am an alumni of GMU. So I did my master's and PhD here from 2001 to 2005. I did joint master's and PhD. And then after going elsewhere for, I guess, 5 years, 2 other academic jobs, I came back and have been a member of the Department of Economics since. During that time, I have been the director of graduate programs for a decade, meaning I oversaw all aspects of both the PhD and the master's program. And then when we introduced the MA online program a few years ago, I became exclusively focused on the online program. So I know the GMU product inside and out from the Department of Economics, both as a student and a graduate and now as a professor. And so wanted to give you that background, both to let you know a little bit about myself, but hopefully I'm able to answer any questions you have. And of course, my goal here is to be as transparent and honest as I can, meaning that my goal is to provide you with the information you need to succeed and flourish in your respective careers. And so let us begin. And so please, Mackenzie. I want to talk a little bit about what I call the Masonomics tradition, because the Department of Economics at George Mason is a really unique department. And it's unique for the reason that we have had in our history 2 Nobel Prize winners, one in 1986, James Buchanan, one in 2002, Vernon Smith. And when I think of the Masonomics tradition, I think of 3 kind of key figures and the traditions they represent. So on the one hand, we have F.A. Hayek, who was a Nobel Prize winner in the mid-70s. He wasn't a professor here, but he was influential in the kind of establishment and emergence of the Department of Economics and the way we view and teach economics here. So there was Hayek, and then I mentioned Buchanan, who was a professor here for much of his career, and he is one of the founders of a field called public choice economics, which is the use of the tools of economics to study politics and all aspects of the political decision-making process. And that's what he won the Nobel Prize for in 1986. And then Vernon Smith, who is also a professor here for several years, won the Nobel Prize for his work in experimental economics, which is the use of experiments to both illustrate and illuminate the various insights from economic theory. And I wanted to start with this, both to give you a sense of the rich tradition that underpins our department, but also if you keep in mind these figures and the traditions they represent, when we come to the curriculum in a moment, especially on the portion where we'll discuss the electives, you'll see the influence of these various thinkers in the electives that we offer. So please, Mackenzie. So what do we do here at GMU? And this is for the faculty, for our students, and it's a mix of these things. We are focused on teaching, and so we have our various programs on the ground. We have an undergraduate program, a master's program, and a PhD program. And then in the online space, we have the program we are discussing together, our online MA program. But we take teaching and the communication of economics to our students and interactions between faculty and students we take it extremely kind of as a main function of what we do. So it's a commitment of our department to provide a sound economic education, and we take it extremely seriously in doing that. In doing that, we also don't just communicate information to our students, but try to empower them to also be effective communicators of economics. And so how do they become effective communicators? Well, one, of course, is to learn the material, but also to have opportunities to express their understanding of that material and apply it in various ways. And again, you're going to see that in the structure of the program when we move to that in a moment. But the other thing my colleagues and I all do is we engage in research and scholarship, but also we take quite seriously public outreach. And so you may be familiar, if you've followed our department, that many of my colleagues have, for instance, blogs. They have regular columns. So my colleague Tyler Cowan, for instance, is the founder of the blog Marginal Revolution, which is one of the top economic blogs in the entire world, one of the most popular in terms of readership. He also has a regular column in Bloomberg, where he writes about whatever kind of the current events are as it pertains to economics. But many of my colleagues are also involved with policy. And so they're not involved with economics and academics in a narrow sense of just sticking to the ivory tower, if you will, even though we are based, of course, in a major university, but we also do policy relevant work. And I'll provide you with a couple illustrations of that later in our time together. And so I wanted to mention this to you so that you can understand our mindset. So now we have an understanding of the various traditions which inform our program, but also the mindset both myself and my colleagues have in the Department of Economics is kind of traversing these four quadrants and trying to hit the sweet spot. And that sweet spot is a mix of all these different areas, which all rely on the economic way of thinking, but direct that economic way of thinking in different directions. Mackenzie, please. So here's our curriculum. And before I get into this, let me just step back and say a couple words about the program itself. So the MA Online program is a standard master's in economics, meaning that it is a 30-credit program. It has 5 required core classes, 4 electives, and then 1 required capstone course. And I'll say more about each of those in a moment. The structure of the program is meant to maximize flexibility. It's meant to maximize flexibility because most people that select the online MA option demand flexibility. They have various obligations in their life that create various constraints whereby they want to pursue an advanced degree, but they don't have perhaps the time, or because of geographic location, they can't do a standard on-the-ground program where you have to be in the classroom a certain number of days, a certain time, and where it has regular kind of semesters that are 14 and 15 weeks. And so what we've tried to do with this program is to hold constant, if you will, the academic content. So you're getting the academic content, but also to maximize flexibility and adaptability to meet the demands of our student body. And I'll give you some specific examples of that in a few moments once we get past the specifics of the structure of the program. And so I want to make clear that when you're in this program, the only thing that differs from our on the ground program is the modality of delivery. What I mean by that is on the ground is here in person in Fairfax, Virginia, where I'm sitting. Online is online. But once you complete the degree, you have a degree from George Mason University. It is a master's degree with all the rights and privileges that are conferred among graduates of that program. In other words, one of the things I don't want you to mistake, which is a common question I get, is it's not like these two programs are distinct in terms of how they are viewed by the university and how they are viewed by outsiders, meaning that your transcript is a official George Mason University transcript. It will have that you received a master's degree on it. It will not say that you are online versus on the ground. So this isn't, some universities have their on the ground program, and then they almost offer like a certificate program online, and people know that they're not analogous, that they're distinct things. This is a master's in economics. You are considered a George Mason University student. You have access and all the same privileges as a George Mason student. Of course, you're not here in person, but if you were, of course, you could come on campus like anyone else, any other student. But if you're remote, obviously you can't go to the library in person, but you can access the George Mason University remotely. And like a lot of R1 research schools, George Mason University has a state-of-the-art library with research librarians and a full access to online resources. There's also career services, for instance, that you can access either in person or remotely. The broader point being that you would have access to the same services of other students. The only limitation would be not being here in person. And that would be the only difference that you would face. And so to get back to the curriculum, the 5 core classes are standard across most economic programs. And so there are 2 micro theory classes, micro theory 1, micro theory 2. There's a macro theory class, a math econ class, and a econometrics class. And so all students will take those core classes. And we have them laid out in a structure or a flow whereby they flow logically. So we start with math econ so that you get up to speed with the math that is required. Then we move into micro theory 1, micro theory 2, typically then macro, and then econometrics. And then you move into your electives. And the electives, you'll see you have an option. I mentioned earlier that you have to take 4 of these. You can kind of customize your program of study. And we've tried to offer a diverse portfolio of classes for you to choose from, depending on what you want to get out of it, depending on what your interests are. And so just looking briefly at them, causal inference is a course that would complement the econometrics class in that it is focused on statistics. So some students come into our program and they want to beef up and focus on their statistics skills, and they would focus on those type of classes. Comparative economic systems is a class that covers different economic systems, but also economic development, institutions and development, and so on. And so students that are interested in those issues would benefit from that class. Public choice and public economics. Remember earlier I mentioned James Buchanan, one of the Nobel Prize winners. This class will engage some of the kind of insights and thoughts that he developed, as well as a broader treatment of issues in public economics. So for those of you who are interested in public policy, who are interested perhaps in working in either local government, whether that's county or state or perhaps national government, this type of course might be of interest to you. Experimental economics. I mentioned that earlier with Vernon Smith, the other Nobel Prize winner. This class covers the foundational insights of experimental economics. Gender economics uses the tools of economics to study a host of issues related to gender issues. And so it's interdisciplinary in that it draws upon a variety of insights from different disciplines, grounded in economics, of course. It is an economics class. But many students find that interesting because it exposes them to a variety of different insights that perhaps they hadn't been exposed to in any other economics class before, assuming they've taken them. Market process theory is focused on the insights of F.A. Hayek and others that work in that tradition. There's an emphasis on entrepreneurship, on the nature of competition. And in this class, we really delve into differences, for instance, between competition and monopoly and government intervention, and use the tools of economics to think through those various aspects. And so if you're interested in things like market process theory, Austrian economics, that class is for you. And then finally, we come to the capstone. And the way to think about the capstone, again, it's a required class, but it is a class that ties together everything you've learned in the program. So it's a class where it's meant to kind of link all the things you've learned throughout your program of study into a single class. And so here you have various aspects to the class. There's a opportunity for you to demonstrate your knowledge of the other material in terms of written work, but also in terms of statistical work. And so one of the things that occurs in this class is a replication study where you find a previous published academic paper that interests you. So it's open-ended because you get to figure out whatever it is that that interests you. I can give you some concrete examples of that during the Q&A if it interests you from actual students in the program. And then you seek to replicate it. So what might that look like? Let's say, as a hypothetical, you picked a paper that looked at the relationship between international trade and economic development. And you picked the paper and it had been published in the year 2000, so 2 decades ago. What you would do is you would take that paper, the model's already specified, the statistical model, but you would collect more data that's more recent, and then you would replicate what the study was doing. And it's an effort or a opportunity, I should say, for you to use the skills that you've developed in econometrics, in micro or macro theory, in causal inference, if you took that class as an elective, and to apply them and to demonstrate your knowledge of those things while gaining additional practice. And so that's the capstone course and what the purpose of that is. In terms of the kind of speed through the program, one of the things you have to understand with this that's unique to it is we talk about sessions when we talk about the online MA program. And so at George Mason University, our normal semester, we have a fall semester, a spring semester, and they're typically 14 to 15 weeks. So standard semester. The online MA runs in sessions, which are 8 weeks each. So it's a more condensed format, again, to maximize flexibility so that people can move through the program at a relatively nice pace. And so typically we recommend that you take one course a session. And so, for instance, if you started in the fall session 1, you would take Math Econ 1. That would be the first 8 weeks, and you would focus on that course. Then the second session of the fall, you'd move into micro. Then, of course, there's a short break, and then you move into the spring, and it's the same 2 sessions, including over the summer as well. There's summer session 1, summer session 2. So in principle, if you want to be moving through the program, you can be taking 2 classes every period, fall, spring, and summer, moving through the 30 credits at a relatively nice pace. But we have some students that have to take a session off, perhaps because of work obligations or because of family obligations, and that's okay too. Again, we work with you to the best of our ability to maximize flexibility and to meet you where you are. Mackenzie, let us move on to the next slide, please. This is an example of some of the work that my colleagues have done, because our faculty designed these courses. And I mentioned earlier, if you think back to those quadrants, the different things we focus on. And so the top left corner is a screenshot of my colleague Tyler Cowan's blog, Marginal Revolution, that I mentioned. And if you're not reading this blog, whether you end up going to the online MA program or not, I suggest you add it to your daily reading list, because it is a wonderful resource in general for economic knowledge. And, like any kind of blog post, it's very concise, but it contains links and just a great source of information. If you look towards the bottom of the screen, you'll see a screenshot about certificate of need laws. And let me just say something about what certificate of need laws are. But before I do that, this is a policy study by my colleague, Thomas Stratman. Thomas Stratman developed the causal inference course and the public economics public choice course. And certificate of need laws, if you don't know what they are, in order to expand medical facilities in the United States, many states require certificate of need, which is that you have to go through a formal process and demonstrate that you need to expand your medical facilities. It's the equivalent of regulation, or regulations plural. And one of the downsides of this is it can be costly to open new medical facilities. This has real effects, especially for people in rural areas, as it pertains to their healthcare. And so my colleague, Thomas Stratman, has done academic research on this, where he's statistically looked at the effects of certificate of need laws on healthcare access. And then he's taken that academic research, written policy pieces on it, but also testified in front of state legislatures on it. And so you can see how the way we think about economics at George Mason, we kind of marry all these different areas together. There's the academic scholarship, but that flows into policy research. It flows into public communication in the case of Marginal Revolution. It flows into our teaching. And then the right of the screen is a book by my colleague, Pete Betke. Pete designed the comparative economics course that I mentioned earlier. And this book is a book in public administration. And so I chose it to highlight because it reflects the highly interdisciplinary nature of my colleagues in the Department of Economics here at George Mason, which is that most programs, most universities have a public administration program, and the economics department wouldn't be part of that. There would be economists in the public administration school, but they'd be separate. Here's an example of one of my colleagues merging or marrying the two perspectives. You have the economic way of thinking, you have public administration. Well, what happens when we combine those things together and think through what the implications are? That's what Pete and his co-authors are doing in that book. So this just gives you a flavor of the type of work that comes out of our program and that students will be exposed to. Not necessarily these exact cases, but this type of work. Mackenzie, please. All right, so let me say something about the classes now. I've gone through the class in terms of the structure of the program, but let me get into a little more detail about the nature of the classes themselves, because this is another question that I oftentimes get. So here's the thing. All of the classes are set up to be asynchronous. And by asynchronous, I'm sure all of you know what this means, but I'll say it just to make sure. By a synchronous class is your kind of traditional class. You show up Tuesday and Thursday from 10 to 11:30. You're face-to-face with your professor and your colleagues in the class. There could be a lecture or class discussion or whatever activities are associated with that class, but they're in person and they're delineated by that time frame. An asynchronous class has time frames on it. You have a session, 8 weeks. You have things due each week, let's say. But within the confines of those broad parameters, the flexibility is built in, meaning that it's asynchronous such that you don't have to show up at a certain day at a certain time. You'll have assignments and readings and work that is due within a certain time period, but how you decide to allocate your time in order to accomplish those various required objectives is entirely up to you. The purpose being, again, to maximize flexibility. So our students in this program, our student body is highly diverse, both in terms of their geographic location, in terms of their background, in terms of their interests, but also in terms of their professions. So we have some people that are in a profession already and they're looking to advance, so they need a master's degree. Other people are looking to make a shift to a new career. and everything in between. We also have had a highly diverse student body in terms of profession. We've had people in banking. We've had people who are financial analysts. We've had high school teachers. So we've had high school teachers who either are teaching or who have been asked to teach AP economics or introductory economics at the high school level, and they want a master's degree in order to beef up their knowledge because they didn't study economics as an undergraduate. We have people that work in nonprofits, so very diverse. We have people straight from undergraduate. We've had people that have been out of the education system for decades because they've been working and they want to come back into that system. And so the backgrounds are truly unique, and our programming allows the different kind of diverse backgrounds and obligations facing our students to still pursue a degree largely on their terms, of course, within the confines of the broad parameters of the program. And so the courses themselves have some similarities. They're not all the same, but many of them contain the type of screenshots you're seeing here. So there'll be videos. That's me in the upper left-hand corner. That's my colleague, Joanna Mullerstrom, in the bottom right-hand corner. She designed the econometrics course and the gender economics course that I mentioned earlier. So there's video lectures. In some cases, there are lectures that are recorded that are there for you. There is reading materials. There are slides. There are practice problems in some classes. And then from there, the various classes vary in how they're structured in terms of their assessment tools. Some have a discussion forum where you get a chance to interact with your colleagues, your fellow students in the class. Others have homework kind of problems that you complete within a time frame and submit. Some have exams. Others have a written component. So it varies from class to class, but everything is housed online and it's accessible to you as a student once you're enrolled in the course. And the modules are clearly delineated and laid out, and they're there for you to complete on your own time within the general parameters. I want to just reiterate that these are asynchronous. So one of the things that means that you need to be comfortable with is that you're not going to be forced to be in attendance, for instance, on a Zoom meeting at a certain period of time each week. There's instructors in the class, so you're not completely isolated either. I don't want you to think that. I want to make sure I'm not communicating that. There are instructors who are available to assist you, whether it's by email or by Zoom meeting. Many instructors, not all, but many have built-in optional office hours where, so some don't set up office hours because no one comes. So they'll say, contact me if you want to meet. Others will say, let's say over an 8-week course, they'll have either every 2 or every 3 weeks, they'll say, I'm going to be on Tuesday evening from 5 to 6 in this time zone. I'll be on Zoom. Come in if you want. I'll talk to you and we can talk through things. Again, others choose not to do that because of the different time zones and the different difficulty of coordinating. So it varies, but those type of opportunities you'll see in the program. But the broader point is that there's an instructor in the course that's available to aid you as needed and as a resource. Mackenzie, please. So here's the application kind of trajectory or workflow. And I won't go through this step by step. I'm going to highlight a couple things and then I'll answer any questions, and Mackenzie will aid me as needed during the Q&A, and we can answer any specific questions you might have. But here are the things I want to highlight purely based on my interaction with students in this program and what I know many students want to know. Number one, you need a bachelor's degree, but it does not have to be in economics. You do not need an economics degree to apply. You do not have to have taken any economics to apply. Those courses listed at the bottom are recommended, meaning that it's certainly helpful to have a background in micro and macroeconomics so that you're at least familiar in a broad sense with the concepts. Same with basic calculus and statistics. But those are not requirements. I have a sheet that I've put together where for the core classes, I've asked each instructor what key concepts they cover as it pertains to math and statistics, because it's one of the most common questions I get. So if that interests you, please feel free to email me, and I will send you the Word document. It lists out, it's like a 2-page Word document for each of the core classes. It says, here are the main kind of topics you need to know, whether in math or statistics. And you can then kind of judge your knowledge of math and statistics and say, okay, I'm comfortable with that, or I might need more work. And let me say that work can be formal. I mean, you're welcome to take undergraduate classes in those things, but it doesn't have to be. You can engage in self-study. I can recommend books to you. There's plenty of online resources, free online, to beef up your knowledge of those topics if you so choose. But I just want to reiterate to you that those are not required. The 2 letters of recommendation, uh, pick people that can speak to your skills and knowledge. One of the questions I oftentimes get is, well, look, I've been out of school for sometimes 3 years, sometimes 5, sometimes decades. I don't know my professors anymore. I haven't kept in touch with them. What am I going to do? And I say, don't worry about it. I understand, and we fully understand. Again, most of our students are in similar, and our applicants are in a similar situation to you. Pick people in your life that, whether it's work related or if you're involved in some kind of community organization, someone that can speak to your skill set, and that those are good people to recommend you. The final thing I just want to highlight here is the statement of purpose. And the statement of purpose is basically saying to you, tell us why you want to join the program. And so use this as an opportunity uh, to introduce yourself, to say, here's who I am, here's my background, and here's why I want to come into the program, and here's why it will benefit me. It is the one piece of the application where you as a person really shines through, because of course your transcript is your transcript from the past. Your letters of recommendation are written by people who are not you. And so your statement of purpose is your opportunity to say, here's what I'm all about. Here's what I'm trying to achieve with this degree, and here's why I think it's a fit for my goals. It's usually a page to 2 pages, but spend a little bit of time thinking about that. And it's also a good check on your own thinking to make sure that you're comfortable joining the program, that you know why you want to do it and what you want to achieve. And we seek to turn around applications once they're processed relatively quickly. So we pride ourselves on our speed. So once an application is submitted, it's not a drawn out process of months. It's a very quick turnaround. And we are available to assist you, not just through the application process, but answering any other questions about the program that you might have. And so, Mackenzie, I think our next slide's our last one, where we transition to Q&A. So let me pause there after going for about 35 minutes. Thank you for your patience, but also open it up and invite you to ask any question you want. Again, I will do my best to answer it. Nothing's off limits as it pertains to the program. So is there anyone that has any questions?
Yes, and then again, as a reminder, please feel free to utilize either the chat, the Q&A, or if you raise your hand, we can see it and we can take you off mute to ask any questions that you have. And then just a quick note about this slide, so everyone can jot down this information. On the left, you'll see our phone number, email, and our website. This will help you get connected with an enrollment counselor. So if you have questions that come up later, and you want to review some program details or admissions requirements, anything of that nature, please reach out to us. We are happy to review your situation one-on-one, give you some tips and tricks for the application process, and just help support you all the way until you start the program. And then the link on the right side is the link to the application where you can get started. All right, we've got one question coming in here. What is the graduation rate for this program?
That's a great question. And in full transparency, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head. It is high. It is high, meaning that certainly above 75%. But I don't want to say anything higher than that because I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to mislead you. The main reason students do not graduate is through external factors. So I don't know if we've had a few students who fail out of the program, but that is like 2 or 3 out of the entire number of students that have joined. The main reason people end up leaving the program and don't graduate is because of some exogenous factor, usually personal or professional. So we've had numerous examples because when a student leaves, we reach out to them because we try to help them as much as they can and offer them, we want to see students succeed. So we'll often reach out to them or they'll reach out to us and say, hey, I'm facing X, Y, and Z. And we say, here are your options. You can take a session off or 2 sessions off. And in some cases, they do that and come back into the program. In other cases, they just say, this isn't working for me anymore. So what are some examples? Of course, without naming any names or getting too specific for privacy reasons, we've had several people who have left because they have switched jobs. So they switched jobs and either had to move geographically, took on additional responsibilities, or faced other constraints, which they just said, I can't continue in this program anymore. I literally can't do the classes and do my new job. That's fair enough. I mean, I understand life changes. Other people have had unfortunate illnesses, either themselves or a family member, where they have had to leave the program because of their personal obligations. We've had several people who have had kids, and because of childcare issues, they've had to step aside from the program. And so those are the typical cases. We've also had a small number of students who join the program, take a couple classes, and then say it's not for them. Several of them have switched programs internal to GMU. So they've gone to other online programs because they said, I started in this, but I switched into the online MBA, for instance. And again, that's just a personal issue. It's nothing to do with the program or no fault of theirs. It's just what suits them and their career goals. And so those are kind of our standard cases. The students who struggle the most in the program, even though this wasn't your question per se, I'm trying to offer you as much information as I can, are the ones who are two categories of people. One are people that don't have the time for the classes. So from our end, when we're looking at an applicant, we're looking at that application, those materials that was on the prior slide. And of course, applicants who get in have a strong background. We think they can succeed. But let's say you're in a job that is an 80-hour-a-week job. We don't know that. And so sometimes students come into the program and they get a little overwhelmed with having to take the class that is 8 weeks and the work, and they just can't strike the right balance, unfortunately. We have had some students that come in who underestimate or perhaps overestimate, depending on which perspective you look at it, their knowledge of math. And they struggle in that aspect of the program, which is why, for instance, I work to put this sheet together of what concepts you need to know, and why oftentimes if people reach out with questions about what background is kind of important to have coming in, we try our best to answer that. So I hope I've answered your question, Travis. If not, please feel free to follow up.
One common question that I get that I'd love to get your thoughts on, for students who are coming in with a lower GPA than they would have liked to have an undergrad, what's your recommendation there for what applicants do in this situation?
Yep. Great question. And so, again, I was director of graduate studies before I was online MA director. So I have read literally thousands of graduate applications. And here's something that I have come to the conclusion about since doing that. GPA tells you something for graduate education, but it doesn't tell you a lot. Meaning that I have known personally numerous students that have had a relatively low undergraduate GPA that have flourished in graduate school. I've also known personally many applicants and students who had near perfect GPAs as an undergraduate who have struggled and left graduate programs. None of us are the same people or person, I should say, that we were when we were an undergraduate. And we've changed, we've matured. And so what does that mean in terms of how do you deal with that? Well, of course, if you're here, if you're thinking about this, you have some interest in pursuing a master's in economics, you wouldn't be taking time out of your day to talk about it. So you already have that intellectual maturity in place, that you're at least thinking about the pursuit of a higher degree. But my advice to you, if you're in this situation, of course, is to use the statement of purpose to openly discuss it. And you know, I could see why people would think, well, if I don't talk about it, maybe they'll kind of overlook it. We're going to see your transcript. We're going to see your GPA. And so the most common kind of explanation is, which again, I fully understand, and we don't hold it against it. I actually appreciate when people kind of are self-aware and they say, here's what happened. So what type of things happened? Well, one of the most common things you will see is if you look at again, this is not for everyone, but for a segment of people who have low GPAs, you look at their transcript, semester one, semester two, sometimes semester three, terrible. And then you start to see kind of almost a linear increase through time throughout the rest of their program of study as an undergraduate. When you see that, what does that tell you? Either the student had a difficult time adjusting to college, perhaps they were goofy. They weren't serious students, right? They were kids. And I was a kid too. Everyone was. We were young and did goofy things. That's what young people do sometimes. And so explaining that and just saying, like, here's what happened and here's why things are different now. I value that. We've had other instances where people took really hard classes. So they started out like wanting to be like, I remember one application, the applicant wanted to be like a pharmacist. So when you want to be a pharmacist, what class are you taking? Organic chemistry, not basic classes. And the student had a very low GPA. They switched out of that into something else. And what they basically said in their statement of purpose is like, look, I thought I wanted to do this. I struggled mightily. I realized it wasn't for me. So I had to transition into, I forget whatever other degree they transitioned into. And that is not reflective, that those poor grades are not reflective of me as a student or my potential. To me, that sounds like a good level of self-awareness and a legitimate explanation. And so again, if you are in that situation, just discuss it and discuss what's changed and how you've changed as a person. So I appreciate the question because it's one of the most common ones that is brought up.
Yes, and thank you for that. I can certainly attest that I think we should all take some pride that we're not the same students we were when we were 17 and 18 years old. So
Right, right.
to shine and just address it in the essay. Absolutely, and keep some questions coming for anything that you have about the curriculum, program details, admissions process. Dr. Coyne, do you have some of the capstone projects that you wanted
Yes.
to do?
Yep. I was just going to turn to
Always
that.
really exciting to hear every year too.
Yeah, yeah. So I mentioned that there's a capstone replication project, and I pulled two that I think are interesting in themselves, but they're interesting also because they demonstrate the uniqueness of the exercise. And so a lot of people think about economics as kind of being very narrow. You have money, you have stock markets, you have finance, and all those things are important. But there's lots of other aspects to it. So here are two projects that these are projects that graduates of the program have worked on. One of our students worked in prisons. He worked in he I forget his exact role, but it was in prison rehabilitation programs. That was his career, and he was pursuing a master's in economics. So for his replication study, he picked a paper that had looked at the quality of prisons and the likelihood of recidivism, of returning to prison. The idea being that the question being, if a county or state, or if it's a federal penitentiary, if they invest more resources in the quality of the prison, and by that I mean programs that are available, training that's available to prisoners, do you get a higher or lower recidivism rate? All right, and the two kind of competing hypotheses for that would go something like this. One argument would be if we can offer prisoners better training, better counseling, and so on, they'll be more successful when they leave prison and be less likely to return. The counter to that is that, well, bad people do bad stuff. You can't, no matter how much you counsel them or do whatever, they're not going to change, and they are supposed to be being punished. So why are we giving them all these services? In any case, this student updated the data and ran this and found that investments in the quality of prison lowered the recidivism rate. A second student was interested in international relations and foreign policy. And for this student, they chose a paper in the Journal of Conflict Resolution, which is actually a journal in international relations, that looked at the relationship between trade and war. So one of the main one of the main theories in international relations is what's called the capitalist peace hypothesis, which is, do countries that trade more engage in war more or less? And there's two views of this. One is that when you trade more with someone, you're less likely to engage in violent conflict or war because you have a trading relationship with them, you have economic benefits, but you also have shared norms and values. The flip side of that is that it can increase conflict because the two sides start looking at the other as competition. So think about right now in the world how many people, rightly or wrongly, view the US and China almost at being at odds with each other, like they win or we win kind of thing. So that's a zero-sum view. And this student updated data on this paper, tested it, and found that trade led to reductions in war. So those are just two examples and demonstrate the breadth of the type of projects that you might undertake. One of the questions from Travis, which I'm seeing in the chat, is about the statistical package, which I appreciate. The programs that are used in or the program, pardon me, that is used in econometrics is Stata. That is the package that is used. Once you got to the Capstone, for instance, you could use a different program if you wanted to. You're not required to use that, I don't believe, at the Capstone level. But all the students use Stata in the econometrics class. Any other thoughts, questions, comments, or anything else I can discuss?
One last question that I'll throw out from some students that I'm working with too. We get a lot of questions about networking opportunities and what students can take advantage of, especially in the online format.
Sure. So I mentioned that for certain things you have access to GMU resources like career services and whatnot for networking purposes. And of course, how valuable you find that will depend on your situation. What I mean by that is if you are in a career where you're happy and you're not looking to switch careers or look for a new job, then career services might be less valuable to you. Still could have them help you with your resume or whatnot if you need that assistance. But, for that type of student, it's going to matter less than others. In terms of networking with faculty, for instance, one of the things, and again, and I understand why. There's a tendency to think about the online MA as being kind of almost its distinct category, separate from the department. But you have to understand how the on the ground program is as well, which is students come to campus a couple nights a week for classes, and then the master students usually aren't on campus. They're out in Washington, D.C., which is 20 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, or in Northern Virginia at their jobs. They're with their families. They're not hanging out with us on campus. And for those who want to build those relationships with faculty, they have to reach out to faculty and build those relationships. And it will be the same for you. So, there's no direct networking from the standpoint that you will interact with me, for instance, on a daily basis. But I have online MA students who email me, even if they're not in a class I'm teaching them, and they might ask me a question about something I've written or something that interests them. And that would be the same for our on-the-ground master's students and our PhD students, by the way. And so, like life in general, a lot of networking is being proactive on the person's part. And those opportunities certainly exist. And being part of the kind of GMU Masonomics family, just like our other graduate students, you'll have those opportunities to reach out. I mean, you'll have a GMU email. You can email faculty if you want, and interact with them. And so that's up to you, but those opportunities certainly exist.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't, Travis, I see your message. I don't have my don't have it on this computer, that document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email here for you and for others. If you email me with your preferred email after this, whatever it works for you, I will respond to your note and attach that document. I can answer then, and then you'll also have my email if you have any other questions after you look at the document. Any other thoughts, questions? If not, or while you're gathering your thoughts, think about the material we covered this evening. Look at the website for the program, but also get a feel. If another piece of advice is to just look around at the faculty who are here. All of us have web pages with our work, and many of my colleagues won't be teaching you in class just because they don't teach an online MA program. But you'll get a feel for the type of research they do, for the things that interest them. And if you have shared interests, again, that's an opportunity for you to reach out to them if you do join the program. And so that goes for any program you're considering. Try to get a feel for the department, what it's about. I've tried to give you some sense of that with the Masonomics tradition, but by looking at individual faculty websites as well as the main department website and the MA Online program website, it'll give you more detail and a sense of what this all involves. Are there any final questions before we part ways? Doesn't look like it. So I want to thank you all again for taking the time out of your schedule to meet with us, for your interest in the program, and feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Coyne. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.